In this first video on search engine optimization, I want to talk about the why behind search engines. I want to talk about how businesses need to think about a search engine differently than consumers do. And so we're going to begin by kind of looking at what does a business need to really care about when it comes to search engine optimization. And then as this course goes on, we're going to get into search engine rankings and factors, and why does a search engine list one website higher than the other, and really what does that mean? And then we'll also talk about what can be done to improve the ranking of any website, which is naturally fixing those ranking factors as to why they rank higher or lower. So to start off, I want to pull out an old graphic. This is a heat map of Google's search engine results page, or SERP. You'll hear this term SERP, SERP. It's an acronym that stands for Search Engines Results Page. So a SERP, much easier to say than Search Engine Results Page, a SERP is the page that you see when you type in a search and then hit enter. So in the URL bar of your browser or on google.com, wherever you go, you can type in your search, Nike shoe store. And then when you hit go, you'll get a results page and it will show you all the different results that you're looking for. Now, this is a heat map overlay. This is a piece of software that tracks where people click naturally on a search engine results page. Take a look at this and see what you notice. So at the top and to the left is where the majority of people are going to click. So you notice it gets that dark red center right there, top and left. And then there's a few clicks kind of top middle, and then there was a few clicks all the way top right. But this is an old version of the search engine where they used to have the ads down the sidebar. So what tends to happen is because we read from left to right, people tend to look at the top left the very first. That's the way that we're conditioned. And so a website, theoretically, that ranks higher on the search engine is going to get more looks and therefore more clicks. We'd like to think that as consumers we do good due diligence and we actually search down the page and make the best decision, but come on, let's be honest. Typically we'll type in a question, a search, something that we're looking for, and we just take one of the top one or two and we click on it. Now, the factors that make us decide which one we're going to click on, they could be very simple, very small factors. Maybe we see a word that we're looking for. Maybe we see a phone number. Maybe we see an address appended on there. So there's very simple reasons why we typically click on something. Now, the percentage of people that click on one listing versus another listing. So each website is listed on the search engine, and typically there's 10 organic listings. There's a few ads, sometimes the maps are there. So there's really a lot of listings on one search engine results page, but typically there's 10 organic listings. Now, the percentage of people that click on one listing versus the other is what we call click-through rate. The acronym is CTR, click-through rate. On this next graphic, this is a CTR curve. Now, again, this is an old graphic. It's been around for a long time. If you've been in marketing, you might have seen this at some point. But what this basically is showing us is on the one axis, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. That's what position you are on the search engine. So if you rank number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, typically you get more clicks at the top than you do down at the bottom. But how many more? So on the other axis, the vertical axis here, it goes from 0 to 20%. What this says here is that the number one ranking, you can expect 18.2% click-through rate. Now, what that means is 18.2% of all the clicks on the search engine results page are going to go to your listing. So if 100 people search for the search term that brings your business up, if you're at number 1, you're going to get 18.2 clicks. If you're at number 2, you're going to get 10.05, so 10 clicks. If you're at number 3, you're going to get 7.22 clicks. Well, look at that. The person at number 1 is getting more than twice as many, 2.5 times as many clicks as the person at number 3. Now, this is an old click-through rate curve. This data has changed quite a bit. From what I've seen on projects that I've worked on, number 1 is getting even more clicks. And by the time you get down to number 5, number 6, it's 0.5% instead of 3 to 1%. what's happened is people become more and more trusting of the search engine that they use, and they less and less want to look through the results. And so when they do a search and they see an answer, they just click on it and they move forward. So the basics of search engine optimization is, let's get up higher than the competition. Let's get up as high as we need to be in order to get all the business that we want. So where we begin in this course is really how people use a search engine. So search engines have a very specific business model. Since the very beginning of Google and Bing, and even before that, there was dogpile.com and mama.com, and there was a lot of different search engines that were out there in the very beginning days of search. And the basic theory with all of them is they were free for any user to use. Now, it seems weird to even suggest that there was a paid version of a search engine, but there's been a couple of people that have brought that model before, and it doesn't work at all, because search engines have just kind of become this thing that we all know that we have at our fingertips, and we can conduct these very powerful searches in literally milliseconds. So the search engine has always been free to consumers, but the businesses have to pay to advertise to those consumers. Now, we do an entire course on paid search, and we talk about how a business will pay to get those ads in front of the consumers, which we're all familiar with the ads at the top of the search engine. We typically try and scroll past them and get to the organic listings or the map listings. Now, search engines, their operations, the way that they pay for all of their web developers and database people, I mean, there's a lot of people that work at these search engines, and the way that they pay for this is through ad revenue from the businesses. And it's important that you think about that and that you know that that's going on, because most consumers, as they use a search engine, they never assume that anybody is paying to be there. But literally, the paid sponsored ads, businesses are paying to be there. So the first step in this process is we need to think of a search engine not as a user that, I want to say, almost mindlessly goes in and just types their search in, expects a set of results, and there's some, I don't think they conscientiously think about it, but there's some kind of implied thought, or there's some kind of subconscious feeling that what we're fed from the search engine are, in fact, the best results. But if you work in search engine optimization, you know that they're not necessarily the best results. They're just the results that met the criteria of the algorithm the very best. Okay, so important to think as a business and not a consumer. What is the reason why people go to a search engine? Why do they search? So it starts with three main types of searches that people conduct on a search engine. Navigational queries is the first type, and those are when we want to get to somewhere. Now, it might be physically and it might be virtually. So let's say I want to go to gap.com. Sometimes people, instead of typing gap.com into the URL bar, some people will just type in gap. And then up will pop a search engine results page. And there you'll see a listing at the top for gap.com. You'll click on it, and now you've navigated to where you were going. So a navigational query can be virtual, but you also might want driving directions to nearest airport. And in that case, you would have a Google map pop up in the listings, you would have a couple of airports listed, and you could easily click on it and go to whatever local airport. So it can be physical or virtual, but a navigational query is when we're trying to get to somewhere. The next type, which is probably the biggest, most popular type, is a informational query. This is when we literally have a question. We're looking for information that can include a wide variety of searches, from the weather to maybe directions. Maybe we're looking for theoretical directions of where we might be going later. Maybe it's not a right now thing. Or maybe we're trying to understand what a trilobite fossil is. And so informational queries could be a lot of different types of queries. And typically this is where content marketing really kind of hits its stride. Content marketing is when you place content on the web that will be found through searches and ultimately lead people back to your website. And so informational searches are really about finding the answers to questions. And then the third type is a transactional query. A transactional query is something that might lead to a payment. Maybe we're trying to make a purchase. Maybe we're trying to download an app. Maybe it's something where we're going to fill out a form and submit a lead. A transactional query is one where we're going to do something. Ultimately, it's going to result in a conversion. And so those types of queries can be very beneficial financially, and sometimes they're very not beneficial to the business. Now, I mention all three of these types of queries because it's important for you to be able to assess your business and figure out which type of searcher is going to come to your business and what is the actual value of that searcher. So here's a quick example. So here's examples of three different types of searches. Imagine somebody typed in the search, hotel in Seattle. Well, that particular search gets around 90,500 searches a month, 90,500 searches per month. And the value of that search is what we would call medium value. Now, the reason why we call it medium value is this is somebody who's looking for a hotel in Seattle, but it's not a very specific query. It's not necessarily, I'm looking for downtown Seattle Marriott, but I'm actually just kind of investigating and I'm looking at, give me information on what on what hotels are out there. So at 90,000 searches a month, this might be a very valid search term for a hotel to go after, but without it being very specific about neighborhood, about brand of hotel, about type of hotel, we're not going to say that this has a super high value to the business. Now, the next one, 4-night Caribbean cruise, that's very specific. That's somebody that wants to go to a specific part of the world, and they know that they want to go for 4 nights. So this one gets 2,900 searches a month, but this is what we would call a high value. So if you are a cruise company that cruises in the Caribbean, this is a money search for you. You want to make sure that your company is at the top of the pile when somebody does this search. And then the third one, easy bread recipe. Well, this one gets 27,000 searches a month, but this is what we would call a low-value search. Why is that a low-value search? Well, how many people go on the internet and search for a bread recipe expecting to pay money for it? Almost nobody. So there might be value that you can bring them into your site and cross-sell them into your branded product or, move them into some type of monetization, but the fact of the matter is the majority of the people that are going to come to your website are going to just honestly be tire kickers, people that are just looking for the recipe and they're not planning on spending any money. So this is the example of 3 different types of searches. And an important exercise as we get going is to think about, your business model that you're working in and what types of searches do we think people would be looking for that would potentially lead to business for us, and then starting to prioritize those searches, because as we learn about ranking factors, we probably want to include those search terms into our website as we optimize and try and produce a better site to work better in the algorithm for the search engine.